Sechas Bava Kamma Daf Tzadi Aleph contains a number of sugyas. The Gemara is working through our last Mishnah, and the Gemara is discussing each sugya that comes up one at a time. We begin the daf, however, coming on the heels of our last sugya that spoke about where we evaluate how much damage can be caused by a certain weapon and whether that weapon could actually kill somebody or not. And if somebody is killed by a weapon which can't kill him, then we don't hold the person responsible. We say he must have been killed by some other factor. So Gemara wants to know, do you do a calculation like that for injuries as well? Do you only calculate whether a weapon can kill someone or can't kill someone? Or for any specific injury, do you calculate, can this weapon actually cause this injury? Or does there have to be some other factor that has gotten involved and therefore the person who injured and attacked him is not so responsible? It was a weapon that he used, the fist, the stone, whatever it is, can't logically cause this injury. Do we do that calculation or not? That's Gemara's question. Gemara tries to bring four proofs to the question. Broadening the question slightly as to, do we make calculations as to how much damage can be caused by a certain situation or not? So Gemara begins by discussing a hole in the ground, a bar that we've seen in the Mishnah on Daf Nun Zayin and Daf Nun Gimel that there are many different types of holes in the ground, a bar, siach ma'ara. The reason that the term mentions a bar specifically is because a standard bar is 10 tvachim deep, which is deep enough to kill someone who falls in there. And that's to teach that any hole, any depression in the ground, which is 10 tvachim deep, that is deep enough to kill someone. So we have a brisa, so we have the Mishnah that spells that out. A hole of any sort, a bar, siach mar, whatever it is, has to be 10 tvachim deep in order for someone who falls in and gets killed, in order for the person who dug the bar to be responsible for that. If it is less than that, and let's say a shara chamar falls in and he dies from it, the one who dug the bar or is responsible for the bar is pater, because he could not have been killed by less than that. So the Gemara wants to know, when we say less than that, are we speaking from the top down or from the bottom up? Are we referring to any amount all the way up to 10 tvachim? Or are we starting from 10 tvachim and saying anything less than that, and we're not saying how far down we go? So we want to say the pashtus is we're talking about from the bottom up. We're going anywhere from 1 all the way up to 10, not including 10. Someone who's killed by that bar could not have been killed only by the bar. The bar is not enough to kill. It's not deep enough, and therefore the owner of the bar is pater. But the implication there would be that he is responsible for hezek. And the Mishnah actually says if he's damaged by the bar, he's injured by the bar, he's responsible for it. We're talking about any bar from 1 to 10 tvachim, not including 10 tvachim, and that would indicate that for 1 tefach bar, he's also responsible. So you see, we don't make any specific calculation to see if he could be injured by this or not, because we would not calculate that a 1 tefach bar can kill someone. So the Gemara says, no, that's not necessarily the pshat. We could really be discussing from above to below. We're discussing from a larger number to a smaller number, and we're saying 10 tvachim can kill someone. Slightly less than 10 tvachim can't kill someone, but can cause nezikin. And if you continue getting smaller and smaller, there's a point at which it can't cause injury either. And therefore, we do have to evaluate a mazik, how much injury can it cause, to see if it's sensible that this mazik could cause this type of injury. And for whatever injury that was caused, we will actually analyze, can this much injury be caused by this size of a bar? Okay, the second proof is from a case where somebody hit someone and caused him to go blind or lose his hearing. So we begin the Mishnah, which begins by saying if he actually struck someone on his eye or on his ear, and he caused them to lose his vision or his hearing, so if he was his own Eved, then he goes free with that. However, if he didn't actually hit him, he just hit some other object near his eye or his ear. So let's say he hit the wall inches from this person's eye or his ear, and the sound or the fright caused him to lose his vision or his hearing. So with that, the Eved does not go free. Versus the reason must be because we evaluate that that noise can't be enough to cause the damage, and therefore he's not responsible for the damage, and it couldn't all be from the noise that he made. So the Gemara says, no, that's not the pshat. The pshat is that we would not evaluate them. We would say that any amount of this is what you did, you attacked in this way, you're responsible for whatever happens. Here, though, it's a noise, and the person who gets scared by the noise is somewhat responsible. A normal person shouldn't get scared by a noise to lose his vision or his hearing. The fact that he did means that his own mazel was involved, or his own responsibility to some extent, and therefore this is different than a standard type of injury. Now, the Gemara wants to show this from a brisa says that somebody who scares his friend is potter in Dinei Adam. In Dinei Adam, you can't be mechayiv for just making noise and scaring someone. However, Dinei Shemaim is chayiv. What's an example? So the Brisa says if he blows a trumpet in the guy's ear and he causes him to lose his hearing, he's potter in Dinei Adam. However, if he grabs him and blows in his ear, then he couldn't escape, and he forced him, then he would be chayiv. Okay, the Gemara now goes on to our next proof. And this is a Brisa discussing how you pay the 5 types of payment to someone that you cause an injury to. So the Brisa says you pay them all right away. You don't wait until later. It's payable as soon as the injury happens. How do you calculate Ripoy and Sheves? Ripoy is how much the doctor bills are, the costs of healing, and Sheves is how much work he's going to miss. So those things you don't know until later. How do you calculate that? So the Mishnah says you don't wait to see how much it comes out to. You make a calculation now what the predicted medical expenses will be and how long it will take to cure and how much work he's going to miss. Bez makes a calculation and puts a number on it now, and the person has to pay for it right now. If he gets healed any faster, or he gets healed slower, then the mazik does not change the payment. He still pays for whatever Bezdin calculated, not more and not less, because we say it's either Min HaShamayim they healed him faster or slower, or something else was involved in making him faster or slower. However, the number that Bezdin gave, that's the number that it is, and it's fixed. So you see, we do make an evaluation. We evaluate how much he needs to pay. Someone says this is not a proof to our question. Our question wasn't do you evaluate the victim to see how strong he is. Yeah, that we do. And we see how long it'll take him to heal. And you evaluate the injury that was caused and how long it'll take it to heal. Your question was, do you evaluate the mazik? Do you evaluate the weapon? And you see, if it cause that kind of injury? That remains a question. You haven't proven it from here. So now brings its final proof. Brisa, which quotes Shimon Hatimani, the Tana, which is Joshua that he says we saw on the last daf. The Torah puts together Evan and Egreif. Just like an egreif, a fist has to be shown to the Eidim for them to be able to calculate what kind of injury can it cause. The Evan, the stone, also has to be visible to the Eidim. It can't have been lost. And again, therefore, we see that we are calculating in cases of injury, and that's the Gemara's conclusion. The Gemara now continues. The Gemara makes a point based on the rights that we quoted earlier. We said that if he got healed faster or slower, he doesn't get any more money or less money, even if he missed more or less work. The Gemara says this is a proof to Rava. Rava said this halacha, something that was evaluated at taking 1 day to heal, and he healed faster, and he went back to work after half a day. He gets to keep the extra money because of Shemayim. They had special rachamim on him, and therefore that's his gain. Now we refer back to the Mishnah. In the Mishnah we had said that if somebody spits on someone, so that's a busha, and he has to pay the baishas for that. It says the problem is only if it landed on him. If it landed on his clothing, you don't pay busha for that. That's just as if he said something embarrassing to him. You don't pay baishas for saying something. You also don't pay the baishas for something that does not affect his body. It only affects his clothing. Umar says in Eretz Yisrael, they said, in the name of Yesi Bar Avin, from here we see this halacha that being mevayish someone with words, you don't have to pay for that. Next, the Gemara refers to the next part where he had said, we had the Bava Kamma in the Mishnah that said, Hakol fi kvoidai, that said that you evaluate how much you need to pay based on who the person is, a rich person or a poor person, as opposed to Rabbi Kiva, who said, no, you view everybody as being a rich person. Even if he's poor, you view him as a rich person who just lost his money now. So remember what's the Bava Kamma was saying, L'kula lochama. He was saying you give more to a rich person. He was saying you give less to a poor person. How is he different than the opinion which we said before that had an equal amount for everyone? So the Gemara explains that he's going L'kula. He's saying that you pay less for a poor person. You have to say that because Rabbi Kiva follows up, says no, a poor person doesn't get less. A poor person is viewed as if he's be'etzem, an aristocrat who just lost his money right now. And therefore, obviously, the opinion before him was arguing that he's saying a poor person gets less. And that's why Rabbi Akiva goes ahead and he gives a number on it. He gives 400 zuz for somebody who uncovers a woman's head. That's specifically an amount that is for an aristocrat. And he says that that applies to a poor person as well because they have an aristocratic status, be'etzem, being a descendant of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Now the Gemara refers to the story that's brought in the Mishnah. The Mishnah had brought an incident where somebody uncovered a woman's head. Rebbe Kiva was machayim 400 zuz, and he said, Rebbe, give me some time. So this part of the story, the Gemara asks, why did he give him some time? The halacha is that you have to pay your damages right away. You don't get time. So the Gemara says you don't get time for paying for an injury. because you cause a person loss. You have to fill in that loss right away. It costs him if he's missing it now. But just for embarrassment, there's no actual money loss that you're paying for, and therefore you can get some time to prove the point. Now, what actually happened there in the case was that the attacker, he went and he caused the woman to uncover her head willingly. He spilled some oil in front of her, and she took off her head covering to soak it up. And therefore he went back to Rabbi Akiva and he said, you see, she doesn't care, so why should I have to pay for the embarrassment for her? The Mishnah says that Rabbi Akiva's response was that he was not impressed. He said, you're still going to be chayav anyway. And a person who injures themselves does not need to pay, even though they're not allowed to injure themselves. But if someone else injures them, he is chayav. So she embarrassed herself. So she may not be allowed to do that. That is his implication. But she doesn't have to pay for that, but you do have to pay for embarrassing her. The Gemara quotes a brisa where Rabbi Akiva says it slightly differently. He quotes an expression, he says, you made a deep dive into the deep waters of the ocean, and all you fished out was pottery shards, meaning he's saying he didn't accomplish anything. And the expression that he uses here is, a person is permitted to injure himself. Now, the Gemara notes that contradicts our Mishnah. And our Mishnah said a person is not permitted to injure himself. He's just putter from injuring himself. Same point, but why does Rabbi Akiva and the Mishnah say that a person is not permitted to injure themselves? And here he's saying the person is permitted to injure themselves. So Rav answers, there's a difference between an injury and an embarrassment. One is not allowed to injure himself. He is allowed to embarrass himself. So Gemara says, hold on. And it doesn't help anything, because the brisa, our Mishnah was talking about chavala and comparing it to embarrassment. So it's saying that the two are the same. So what do you answer? So the Gemara says what Rava was saying was as follows. It's a kal v'chomer, sort of. The Mishnah says that a person who hurts himself, even though he's not permitted, he's pater. And it means to say is as follows. One is permitted to embarrass himself. Still, if somebody else embarrasses him, that doesn't bother him. Because just because a person is permitted to embarrass himself doesn't give someone else the right to, he'll still need to pay. Now, there he didn't really do anything by embarrassing himself because he's allowed to. Now, chavala, to injure oneself, someone is not allowed to injure oneself. You may therefore think if somebody goes ahead and he injures himself, he actually will do that. That should pater the one who injures him, because this guy is some makoko that he even did something he's not allowed to do. So someone else should therefore be pater for doing it. And it says no. Even for chavala, which a person is not allowed to injure himself, someone else who will do it to him is still chayiv. The Gemara now wants to get more to the sugya of, is a person allowed to injure himself? So the Gemara says, is it true what you're telling me, that a person is not allowed to injure himself? If a brisa seems to say otherwise. The brisa is talking about a shvuah, when somebody makes an oath, he swears that he's going to do something. So the brisa says that if somebody swears that he's going to hurt himself and he does not hurt himself, he is chayiv for violating the shvuah. And you might think he's pater, because he swore to hurt himself. And we have a drasha. The drasha talks about someone who swears falsely, says lahara ilahativ, to do good or to do bad, and therefore they are equal, to do good and to do bad. Just like doing a good to someone is a permissible action, and doing bad also has to be something which is a permissible action. But I can learn from that to include where somebody swore to hurt himself, because that's also a permissible action. So you see that he's chayiv for swearing falsely for that. So you see that swearing falsely is a permissible action. So Shmuel answers that doesn't mean when he said to l'harab atzmai, to do bad to himself. It's a phrase that's used, doesn't mean to hit himself. It means to fast, to starve himself. And that's not what we are discussing. We're discussing hitting oneself. So Gemara says, okay, well, hold a second. But in context there, we're talking about doing the same thing to oneself and to others. How does one make someone else fast? You can't starve someone else. Gemara says, yeah, you can. You can lock him up. Put him in a place where he has no access to food. So Gemara says, but that's not the pshat. Brisa there says that doing bad to someone else means hitting him. To where he says, I swear I'm going to hit this person, I'm going to break his head. So it's not correct. Obviously, then when we are referring to hurting oneself, we're talking about hitting oneself. So versus Machlekes Tanoim, there's an opinion that says a person that is permitted to hit himself, to hurt himself, to wound himself. There is an opinion that says a person is not permitted to hurt himself. So if you have one brisa saying each way. Now the Gemara wants to go looking for a source. Where do we have a brisa? Where do we have a Tana that says one is not permitted to injure himself? So Gemara is going to try a few different brisas here. First Gemara brings a brisa of Rabbi Elazar, says that it is forbidden for a person to commit suicide. Quotes the pasuk of Aches Damcham Lenafshei Seichem Edrosh. Hashem says, I will claim your blood from you. So even if you spilled your own blood, somebody who dies by suicide, I will claim that from you as well. That's also considered to be murder. So therefore you see, you're not allowed to injure yourself. Gemara says, no, that's, you're not allowed to kill yourself. Injuring could be different. You don't see that from here. So of course another brisa about tearing one's clothing out of mourning. So the brisa says if somebody, the Bava Kamma there says one is allowed to tear clothing out of mourning, and that's not considered to be the ways of the Amari, which is an Isser. And Rabbi Elazar says, I heard that you shouldn't tear it too much because it's about Tashchas. So whoever wants to say, and if one will, then he gets Malchus for that, for the Isser of Batashchas, of destroying wastefully. So the Gemara wants to say, it's a Bava Kamma. If he tears his body, certainly it's worse than tearing his clothing, even for that reason. So the Gemara says, no, maybe not. Maybe clothing is worse. Maybe one is allowed to cut his body, but not cut his clothing, because the body will heal, and it'll be reversed. But clothing, once it's torn, is never the same. It can't be healed. We see that Rabbi Yochanan called his clothing his mechabdusa. He called it his honor because it frames the person with honor. Rabbi Chizda, when he walked through thorns, would lift up the hems of his robes so that the clothing doesn't tear, and he would be cut and be scratched by the thorns on his feet. And he said, my feet will heal, my clothing won't. So you see, you cannot learn from the Isser to tear clothing to create an Isser to hurt one's self. So the Gemara says, okay, I have a different Tana. This one the Gemara accepts. It's Rabbi Elazar HaKafar, quoting Rebbe, who says, or the son of Rebbe, who said, what is Pshat in the pasuk talking about a Nazir? It says, V'chibra olav ma'ashachat ala nefesh. And he has to bring a carbon chatas at the end of his Naziris to atone for what he sinned in his soul. What sin did he do? So he explains, because he pained himself by withholding from wine. So he wants to say Bava Kamma. If he's not allowed to withhold from wine, and he's called a chayte, he's called a sinner for withholding himself from wine, certainly for actually cutting or hurting himself, he's considered to be a sinner for that. Okay, now the Gemara refers back to the Mishnah. The end of the Mishnah had said that if someone is not allowed to pull out his own trees, cut out his own plants, that would be batashchas. However, someone else does it to him, that person has to pay for it. One is not allowed to do it, but he's putter if he does it to his own, but someone else does it to him, he's chayiv. So Gemara quotes a brisa that Rabbi Bava Kamma said in front of Rav. If Reuven says to Shimon, you killed my ox, so you pulled out my trees, and he says, that's true, but you told me to kill the ox, and you told me to cut down the tree, so that's a good taina, and he's putter from having to pay for it. So Rav responded, he said, that can't be correct, because then there's always an answer. How he will ever collect anything, the attacker could always say, you told me to. So Rabbi Yochanan said, okay, so should I delete this brisa that it's not correct? He said, no, let's try to explain it in a way that makes sense. It must be an ox who was supposed to be killed. He was chayiv misa, and a tree that was supposed to be cut down because it was an atzei asherah. So he responded and he said, then why is he complaining about it? It was supposed to be. What is his taina? His taina is because he wanted to do the mitzvah himself. It's a mitzvah to kill this ox and to pull out this tree. He wanted to do it, and that person came and took it away. That's what his complaint is. Here, the lachataka would be that since it's meant to be killed and it's meant to be cut down, if the person says, you told me to do it, that's believable. And therefore, he doesn't need to pay him for that right. Now, if you take away someone's mitzvah, you do have to pay for it. The Gemara quotes a brisa that says, V'shavach v'kisa, somebody who shechts a bird or a chaya, he's the one who should do the mitzvah of kisi adam. And there was a story that happened where somebody came and grabbed the mitzvah away from him, and our Gamliel was mechayfim to pay 10 gold coins, 10 zuhum. That is the price you pay for stealing someone's mitzvah. The Gemara now speaks a little bit about the halachos of baltashchas. Rav says a tree that still grows a kav of fruit is also to cut down. So baltashchas, Gemara asks that they have a brisa that says in an olive tree that has only a quarter of a kav is also to cut down. The Gemara says olives are different because they're valuable. A quarter of a kav is worth keeping the tree. Says Rav Chanina, my son Shivchas, he only died because he cut down a fig tree before its proper time. It was still producing. Says Ravina, if its wood is more valuable for construction than it is for fruits, it is permitted to cut it down. And quotes a brisa that explains this. Brisa is talking about the pasuk that says you're not allowed to cut down fruit trees to make weapons for war, to knock down the wall around the city you're attacking. So there's an extra word there. It says Rak eitz asher teida kilei eitz amachalhu oisei tashos v'charasa. So it says any tree which you know is not a food tree, that you can cut down. What does it say? Asher teida, that you know. That extra phrase is to include. Sometimes you can even cut down a fruit tree. So if it's a tree that doesn't produce fruit, you can cut it down for war. If it's a tree that does produce fruit, you can cut it down for war also. only if there's no other option, only if there is no non-fruit tree around that you could use instead. Now, that Brisa says, therefore, you could use a fruit tree for its wood if you need to. And the reason why it says it, though, is to give priority to the non-fruit tree. You should try to spare the fruit tree. Says the Gemara, I would think that even if the fruit tree is more valuable for the job and more suitable for the job, you should use the non-fruit tree more. Therefore, it says rock. No, you only have to prioritize the non-fruit tree if it's equal in value. Mar quotes the story. Shmuel had a sharecropper who was working in his field. He brought him dates, he ate them, and he tasted wine. He said, why is there a taste of wine here? He said, because these date trees are growing between the grapevines. He said, it's ruining the grapevines. It's called hashches. Bring me their roots tomorrow, meaning uproot it and pull it out. So most of the Gemara says Rav Chizda saw little trees growing between his grapevines, and he said the sharecropper pulled them out. The value of the trees should go towards producing wine instead of using the value of the wine to waste on producing these trees.